Welcome to Holly's Pandorium, featuring your host, psychic medium Holly Jordan.
Hey everybody, I'm so glad you're back. This is Holly from Holly's Pandorium, and I have our favorite correspondent, our only correspondent for the show. This is Jay Cobb. All right, Jay, we're ready. What have you got for us today?
All right. Well, what's cooking? I was sent by you as boots on the ground and foreign correspondent to the Mt Hood Sasquatch Festival in Mt Hood, Oregon. So we're a little far from the coast, but we're up Mt Hood, which sure. And this took place. This was the inaugural event, so this is the first one ever.
Okay.
And this was held at the Mt Hood Sasquatch, the Mt Hood, Oregon Resort is where it was, which is right at the base of Mt Hood. Mm-hmm. And this took place April 11th, 12th, and 13th, so Friday, Saturday, and Sunday.
Okay.
And I'm just going to read off, here's a little bumper sticker that they gave us.
I love it. I saw Sasquatch. That's so awesome. I love that.
And that was the address at Welch's, where the resort is in Welch's, Oregon.
I love that.
So there's that. I'm actually going to be sending that to you, but you can add that to your collection. Yeah. So I'm just this was sponsored by, put together by Cliff Barakman, and I hope I'm pronouncing his name right, Barakman. He is one of the, TV Bigfoot people.
Yes.
What is it? Finding Bigfoot or whatever, the TV.
Something like that. Yes. I'm terrible with show names, but I believe you're correct. Yes.
Yeah, he actually owns property near there, near at the, the foothills of Mount Hood. And he has like Bigfoot encounters, like families of Bigfoot around his place, like constantly. I mean, if he wants to do any Bigfoot researching, I mean, he basically walks out his back door.
That's so cool.
And so he gathered all these speakers and presenters together in order to have a local to him, this Bigfoot festival. And, he didn't really have to drive anywhere. And so it was put on by him, but just, some of the presenters, he had the big gun, Jeff Meldrum, who came out. He had, Joseph Garanda, which I personally don't know of his stuff. Sure. But in the Bigfoot field, I guess he's a name.
Right.
Michael Freeman, a lot of Bigfoot people would more familiar with his father. He is the son of Paul Freeman, who, for years had, Bigfoot castings and stuff like that. And so he's deceased now. So his son basically was a presenter to talk about his dad's research and, showing some of the castings that his dad had made and basically keep the Freeman legacy alive and inform everybody, keep, what his dad had done. Also, there was a radio personality, a host, paranormal, all things weird. Some of you here on the Pacific Northwest may know of him. His name's Clyde Lewis. He has a radio show called Ground Zero.
Yeah.
Okay, well, Clyde was there, and he was a presenter. So he was talking about all the woo, as your interview with Scott Taylor mentioned, in the Bigfoot community. Anytime you're talking about anything other than bone, fur, blood, and guts, Bigfoot, then they call that the woo
right
stuff.
Right. Yes.
And so Bigfoot people, we just call it the woo. And that's kind of short for everything paranormal associated with Bigfoot. Yes. I will say that Cliff himself, Cliff Barakman, who put this on, is a staunch blood and guts Bigfoot, physical, and he will not listen to anything about any woo. He is strictly, it's a physical being.
Okay.
And that's the end of the story,
Okay.
as far as he's concerned. I will tell you that. We already talked about Jeff Meldrum. Jeff Meldrum is a scientist.
Right.
He will present facts. He
Right.
will present evidence. He can do everything, but he will not delve at all into any of the woo.
Right.
Because it can't be proven.
Right.
And as far as he's concerned, everything that he presents as evidence is still, he even says it's circumstantial evidence.
Okay.
He says, but I can tell a lot about the physical nature based upon the physical evidence. Like he can look at castings and say either, yes, this is biomechanical, or no, it is not.
Right.
Or it displays these traits, or it does not.
I want to interrupt for just a half a second. Isn't he the guy who says, I have a lot of evidence, but no proof? Isn't that something he says? Which at first I thought, what is he saying? And then I went, oh, okay. So there's a lot of details that, there's footprint copies, there's hair, but there isn't anything unequivocally that says this is ABC, whatever.
Because you can't match A, B, and make C if C doesn't exist.
Right.
So you can have DNA that is uncircumstantial, or we don't have it in the database, but that doesn't mean Bigfoot. That just means something I can't identify.
Right. So for those of you,
and you can say, yes, this is a biomechanical living being, but without a Bigfoot, you can't say this was created by a Bigfoot.
Right. So for those of you that are on the fence, that aren't that familiar with the Bigfoot stuff, or maybe you're just not that curious about it, or you haven't been, there is a ton of collected data.
Yes.
And when I was growing up in the 80s, there was a spoof legend, and a wives' tale, as they say, or an urban legend, about a couple of guys that had made Bigfoot fake footprints, and they were putting them over their shoes, or they were walking with them somehow and stomping them in front of them and trying to, pretend make Bigfoot marks in the woods. And so since that time, that's many years ago. And we now, 40 and 50 years later, we have castings. I'm saying the global we for people in the Bigfoot community. There's a ton, hundreds and thousands of castings that have the markings of a live creature, not creatable. And there's enough scientists that say, after examining these many, many samples, it's definitely something alive. It's not something that could be replicated. And there, as we know, our thumbprints, our fingerprints, they all have spiral patterns and all this. Well, even the pads of our feet have lines, just like our smile lines, just like our face wrinkles that we get as we age. Our feet always have indicators, just like when you are born. Most people, not everybody, gets a birth certificate with your footprint because it's unique to you.
They're called dermal ridges.
Yes, thank you, Jay.
Dermal ridges were fingerprints and footprints.
Right. So this is one of those things where we have all this collected stuff, but can we say for sure that it's from a Bigfoot or what? Something made it. Something. Right. So here's what they can say. Something alive made the footprint. Right. It's not man-made. It's impossible for it to be man-made. So that's something. That's kind of amazing.
Right. It's evidence.
Right.
But it's not proof. And that's what Jeff says. He looked at the dermal ridges, anatomy, locomotion, and all of that stuff fits. He says, yes, they talk about the mid-tarsal break where our foot, bends on the ball of our feet.
Right.
Well, apparently Bigfoot, his pivot point is in the middle. And so that's what causes those mid-tarsal ridges, is when the foot flexes and the toes and the first half of the foot bends down, it pushes the dirt up into a little ridge. right about mid-foot. And that's what that's what he shows. He shows this is the biomechanical and this is the nature, and it proves that this, if you're that big and hulking and you're carrying that much weight, it's better to have it in the center of the foot.
Right.
The reason we have ours and we pivot on the front of our foot is for running and endurance. I mean, when our Neanderthal ancestors are running across the savannah chasing down antelope or whatever, you needed speed and endurance. And so that's why we're pushing off on the front half of our foot, and the ball of our foot is for speed and endurance.
Or escaping predators.
Yes, or running from, lions or whatever.
Right.
But for Bigfoot, look at the terrain that they're mostly found in, like in Mt Hood and stuff, where very steep and angles and stuff like that. And it's advantageous to have that pivot point in the middle. And we've, like you said, we've got castings and stuff now where you can see where the toes come in and grip. I mean, just amazing stuff. But anyway, so you have these guys there. I'll just say that it was a wide variety amongst the Bigfoot community. You had the people that are physical only. You had people that are, like Scott Taylor, who's like, look, I just know what I've seen, and evidence is evidence, and and I'm taking it all in as evidence.
Right.
And then you had, the paranormal people like, Clive, who's all about fourth dimension and wormholes. And I mean, he can really
very fringe thoughts that most people don't ever consider or talk about.
Right. Very technical stuff.
Yes. Very technical.
Yes. And so it was quite a wide variety of guest speakers. I will say that. One of the things that they had at this particular festival is that each of these presenters had their own time slotted for dinner meals or whatever for a fee. You could pay for a private dinner and a private audience with each of the speakers, many or as few or that you wanted to, so that you could have some private time with them. I chose not to do that. I was there strictly for the presentations only. And basically taking notes. So without further ado, I'm going to dive right into that. So I'm going to talk about Friday here. Friday was basically this is an inaugural event, like I say, and it was an introduction to the panel speakers, and basically it was an open Q&A. They had all the presenters up on stage with microphones, and you could ask anybody anything or everybody a single question or whatever. So it was basically just open mic night. And then after that, Dr. Jeff Meldrum, he gave a talk on what we just talked about, the flexibility of the mid-foot, mid-tarsal break, which was what his talk was about, in comparison to the human foot, the rigid midfoot for endurance, we talked about, as opposed to an ape's foot, which has the opposable thumb part of their foot, but it's made for grasping.
Correct.
Unlike, much like our hands. So their feet are like this, whereas, our feet, the big toe is the biggest toe.
Right, and it's up front next to the other digits.
It's up front and right, and so is Bigfoot's.
Yeah, interesting.
So it's not like an ape, which is opposed and built for grasping. So he was talking about the difference between apes, humans, and the Bigfoot feet anatomy. And basically he was saying, everything is tabloid until there is evidence. So everything is hearsay, everything's a story, everything's a myth, until it's real. And so that's what he talked about. Then after that was Paul Freeman's son, Michael, who basically, he brought some film footage of his dad. His dad, I guess, was a Forestry Service guy when he had his encounters with Bigfoot. And so that's when he started casting prints and stuff like that. And And Michael fully admitted his dad, anytime somebody called him and said, hey, I found some Bigfoot tracks,
Right.
he would go and cast them.
Okay.
Whether they were real or whether they were fake.
Okay.
He did not discriminate.
Okay.
And Michael fully admits, he says, look, some of my dad's castings are hoaxes. And he fully admits it. He's not saying everything that I have is real, but what he's saying is that anytime anybody said that they had something, he cast it.
Okay.
As preserving evidence.
Okay.
Whether it's evidence of a hoax or whatever.
Well, that's impressive that he's not denying it and that he's actually offering that as here's what I know. This is as real as it gets. It's definitely something. And kudos to his dad for just being open, because you can't assume that everyone that says, hey, I found something is a prankster or a hoaxer.
Right.
That wouldn't be fair. You got to give everybody a chance. And so I think that's very impressive. I really like that.
And in the Bigfoot community, his dad, Paul Freeman, took, and still to this day, takes a lot of guff as a hoaxer. Is
really?
He's taken a lot of shots, and people discount his evidence and stuff like that, even to this day, because of that. Because a lot of the cast prints that he had have been fake, and they've been proven to be fake.
Right.
But like I said, he never claimed that everything he cast was real. He cast everything as it was presented and let other people figure it out.
Right.
Excuse me, I have a little bit of a runny nose here.
It's that time of year. I've got tissue right next to me for the same reason.
Yeah. So anyway, so he printed that, and he had a couple of choice castings there, but he basically talked about his dad's, collecting of the castings for a specific period from 1992 to 1997. And within that time period, he had 5 encounters and cast over 40 casts within just that 5-year period.
That's a lot.
Yeah. And he was talking about an incident, and it was kind of neat because he was there and also Jeff Meldrum was there, but he was talking about an account when he was a kid. I don't know. He was like 10 years old. He broke a bone, and he was basically bedridden, so he couldn't go. But I guess Jeff Meldrum, had examined some of his casts and stuff, and some of them had been faked or whatever. So Jeff Meldrum, thinking that he's a hoaxer, publicity hunter or whatever, showed up at his house unannounced and said, "Hi, I'm Dr. Jeff Meldrum from Idaho, University, and I want to talk to you about this." And so they're talking about his methods and this and that and all that. And then he pops up, Mr. Freeman pops up and says, "Yeah, I got a call this morning about some fresh, Bigfoot prints." He says, "You want to go see them?" And Jeff Meldrum even admits, he's thinking to himself, "Oh, how convenient." I mean, I show up unannounced, and all of a sudden, there's fresh Bigfoot prints waiting for me.
Right.
And so he says, "Yeah, sure." Right. So he goes with him, and it was a rainy day.
Okay.
And he takes him to the spot where these fresh Bigfoot prints were. And Jeff says that it was raining so hard that that he couldn't cast a print. I mean, he just couldn't. And Jeff fully admits that he says, you were talking about the dermal ridges. And he said it was so fresh that you could physically see the dermal ridges in the mud.
Oh, wow.
And he literally watched as the rain washed the dermal ridges away.
Wow.
And he says, I stood there with my mouth open.
I bet.
Looking at this fresh print and just absolutely watch it disintegrate and melt right in front of his eyes.
I'm just grateful they got to see it.
Right. And it also proved to Jeff Meldrum right on the spot that this guy's no jokester. He's
He means what he says.
He means what he says, and he's telling the truth. And
wow.
And so that was something that he had presented to him. And then he also talked about. I sent you a picture. I don't know if you're going to throw it up later or now.
Okay.
Of the ass squatch. Have you heard of the ass squatch?
You did send me that, I believe, and I don't have it loaded on this computer, unfortunately. But yes, do you want to explain that?
Hopefully, at some point, you will be able to, I don't know, maybe add it in post or whatever.
Right.
Put it up. But there is a, little known, but quite controversial casting, because you think of a Bigfoot cast, you think of footprints and occasionally
hands and feet. Yeah.
Hands and feet, right. Well, there is actually a full cast of a butt print in plaster.
Right. Yep.
Of a Sasquatch sitting on a mud bank.
Yep.
And they cast this print.
Mm-hmm.
And Jeff Meldrum, who is the guru on, ape anatomy,
right,
says, yep, it displays all the physical anatomical details of a female.
Right.
And it looks like it's an ass print, but it's 2 feet wide. So it's a big girl. And you can see the, outgoing portals, I'll say.
Okay. Fair.
In detail.
Okay.
In both of the cheeks, the upper thigh or whatever.
Sure.
So if you can pull that up, or I don't know, your viewers and listeners, can Google images or whatever and look for the ass squatch.
That's incredible.
Print casting picture, and it is, and Jeff says it is an ape-like female anatomy. It is 24 inches wide in total. That's 2 full feet, people. So anyway,
that's fascinating.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't be able to tell you if it was a human depiction or not, but other people would. So I have heard a few people that are in the know about such things, not to be weird, but there are indications of some things. It's hard to tell with a hand or a foot of a large creature if it's female or male. With all the studies of deer and elk and things that people hunt, there's been years and years and studies, and there are some indicators that help us to understand what's what and who's who, and even birds' footprints and patterns from wings and all kinds of things can be tracked. But this is something so specific and so unique, it would be really difficult for anyone, I think, even an anthropologist or a zoologist, to unequivocally say this is not a female human. So that I can see where people might really scoff at that one, but I do think it's phenomenal. I think it's amazing that it exists.
Yeah. Well, like
it's very unique.
Jeff Meldrum is the anatomical ape anatomy expert in the field.
Right.
And it passes scrutiny with him. So
right. So that's something. Yeah.
I'll go with him. I mean, he's seen more and done more and knows more than me or most people. Right. And especially when it comes to anatomy, biomechanics, and that sort of thing. Right. There was a question and answer session with Joseph Garanda. Mm-hmm. But unfortunately, that was in another building, and I could not find that building.
Oh, bummer.
This was an inaugural event, like I said, and some of the organization was this organization.
Well, sure. As one would expect with a new event.
Exactly. And this was at a resort. So moving on to Saturday, it started Saturday off with the movie Flash of Beauty, which is a very famous Bigfoot movie. And almost all of these events, at some point, they'll show this documentary, Flash of Beauty. And then after that, Jeff Davis was the presenter. He's from Mount Hood, Oregon Trail historian and archaeologist.
Okay.
And he also does some paranormal ghost hunting. And he was basically talking about Mallard's Cafe, which is at the Mt. Hood Resort. So I guess it's like the restaurant for the resort.
All right.
And apparently it's haunted. And it's haunted by a man in overalls. And, he staff and patrons and everything have been seeing him all over throughout the years. But basically, Mallard's Cafe at Mt. Hood is haunted. And so if you ever find yourself at the Mt. Hood Resort and you're eating at the cafe there and you see some old man in overalls that looks out of place, you may be seeing a ghost.
That's awesome.
So there was that. And then Jason Hasler from Big River Paranormal. He's part of the Taps family and the Ghost Hunter TV show, with Jason and Grant. He was there as a presenter, and he was basically talking about some of his former investigations.
Right.
He gave some information on some upcoming investigations and that they're going to be doing, and that I guess they're going to be open up to participation for fee. If you want to go on some of them, so that type of thing. And he talked a little about historical research when you're going on you're familiar with this. You've been on these.
Yes.
The historical research that goes on, debunking that, evidence, EMP videos, that sort of thing. And then the main thing that I want to talk about, this was the highlight of the show for me.
Okay.
The presenter was, I hope I'm getting his name right, Mark Mearsell. It's Myrsell, Mearsell. And he is interesting guy. He's a historian, a researcher of old reports. And basically, he's like, I considered him like a cold case police investigator.
Oh, interesting.
What he does is he takes these old accounts, Bigfoot accounts, things that were in the paper in the 1800s, 1900s. And he basically gathers all the information that he can about these particular events. And then he reinvestigates them today. And so he goes back and he looks up all the historical information, and then he goes out and he tries to find the sites. He tries to find the people. He tries to find the relatives and re-interview them, and then compare and combine and congeal everything with a modern eye.
Wow.
He was focusing on a particular event that happened in 1924, and it's famous today. In fact, the area where this took place actually got the name Ape Canyon because of this event. So this took place on Mount St. Helens or near it, and it's called Ape Canyon today because of this incident. And so he basically went over this incident. And for those that aren't familiar with it, what happened is that these four miners, gold miners, not under the age of 21, but gold miners were up on this ridge of Mount St. Helens, and they had a gold mine up there. And basically, it's top of a ridge, but on the side of the ridge there was a little shelf, right? A little shelf, and their mine was just over the edge of that shelf. And so what they had done is usually they would just camp up there, mine, and leave. It was not a permanent place. Well, they decided that they were going to build a log cabin. And I sent you a picture, and hopefully we can throw that up at some point.
Yeah.
And
I was just going to say that I don't want to give away what happened.
No, not
we'll
yet.
Wait till you get to it yet, and then I'll throw the pictures up.
Yeah. Well, wait till we get to the incident, and then we can throw that picture up. But anyway, they built this little cabin up there to make a semi-permanent house where they could be out of the shelter and mine up there for longer periods of time and store supplies and whatever, so that they didn't have to pack everything in and everything out. So it's not like, there's a trail up to this point. You literally have to hike up and over the ridge in order to get this. So it's not easily to get to. And so, it's the gold miners, Fred Beck, Ronald Beck, Leroy Smith, and Marion Smith. So these were all people that they all knew each other. They were either father and son or brother-in-law and son. I forget the relationship, but they were all relations. And they found a single footprint, and they heard whistling coming back and forth across the top of the ridges is when they first noticing this stuff. So there's these weird whistling going back and forth from the ridges. And then I guess they had an encounter, a sighting. And then what started this event is after dinner, the youngest of them, I forgot which one it was. I think it was Marion Smith. I may be wrong. But he was going down to wash the pots and pans from dinner.
Okay.
And he ran into one of these Bigfoots, and he shot at it.
Oops.
And by their account, he claimed to have shot 16 shots before it went down. So I'm assuming that, with like a repeating rifle that holds 10 shots, that's 10 shots plus a handgun.
Wow.
To equal 16 shots. Before he thinks he killed it. He says it fell down, over the backside of the ridge, but he was so scared he ran back to the cabin.
Right.
And never went to go investigate to see if he had killed it or found it. Or, if you shoot 16 shot at a bear, you're not going to go walking up on it to see if it's still alive, because it's going to be very angry.
Can I intercept a quick question?
Sure.
So he was down washing dishes
After dinner, yeah.
Okay. So did he feel threatened? Is that why he started shooting? Did the scene come towards him, or did he just see it? Do we know that?
He just saw it, as from what I believe. They had seen something the day before, but he was so scared when he saw it again.
Clearly.
That he said, I don't know what's going on, but I'm just getting rid of it.
Yikes.
So I think he just, out of panic, sheer panic, just started unloading.
That's too bad. Wow.
Yeah. Well, this is 1924.
Right. No, I get it.
Yeah.
Who knows what he thought was coming down on him. So yeah, I get it.
Yeah. So, yeah. So anyway, he fired 16 shots. Now, did he hit it 16 times? I don't know. But anyway, it fell or ducked down or rolled off the edge of a ravine, and that's the last they saw of it, because he ran back to the cabin, told everybody about what happened, and then they sustained an all-night assault on the cabin by multiple of these creatures. Yeah, so anyway, this cabin was pelted all night long with these bowling ball sized boulders.
So here's a depiction.
Yeah, this is an artist's rendering of the event, where they literally assaulted the cabin with these rocks pelting on the tops of the window. They were beating on the walls. They were banging on the doors. They were trying to get in through the door. And one of the accounts is that, let's go to the other picture. One of these boulders was hurled with such velocity that if you look at this picture and you see the man on the right, and he's holding a bowling ball sized boulder, and that boulder was hurled with such velocity that it actually knocked the chinking into the cabin. And that boulder came into the cabin as well. So for those that are not familiar with log cabins, first of all, look at the massive size of these logs that they built this cabin with.
They're enormous.
They're enormous. I'm looking at these as 16 inches or better in diameter across from one side to the other.
Right.
And the chinking, which is the material that is packed in between the big logs, is, to seal it off from the weather or whatever.
Right.
And this being a pretty rough and tumble Normally it's done with mud and straw, what they call cob, is packed in between the logs to seal and insulate from the weather. Well, the chinking in this case is done with basically split logs. So if you see in between these big long logs, you have these short logs that are 3-4 feet long, but they're basically split rail fence type split logs that are being wedged in between these, and the weight of these trees, which we calculated, or you calculated, at 50 pounds per square foot.
And that's for a normal log. So if you've seen a log cabin and you've seen what they look like, the diameter is something you could almost put your hands around. These logs were 3 times that size. So they were 3 times the weight, essentially, if you're just guessing the weight. And we're talking about, these are heavy, big, enormous 20-foot logs. Look at these two gentlemen. If we estimate them lowly at 5 feet 5 inches, maybe my height, and then kind of, that was an average height around there. But even so, not knowing for sure their height, look at the upper body of these two gentlemen and look at how deep those logs are. That's a huge piece of wood. That's not light. And they're at the bottom. Their feet are at the ground. So imagine the cabin is a good 2 stories high at the top. All that weight from the roof and the walls is pressing on those lower beams and that lower filling material. And for it to come flying through there had to be voracious.
Yeah, so actually pushed that entire log, chinking log, pushed it into the cabin, as well as the projectile itself came flying into the cabin. So it was hurled with that type of velocity. Now, to me, that had to be like being a shot out of a cannon, almost, in order to be able to force that split rail chinking and the stone itself fully into the cabin rather than bounce off. Later on in the morning, they had found that they had actually tried to dig under the foundation and to get into the cabin.
That's scary.
But I don't know, much like vampires, once the sun came up, they got tired and they quit. And all 4 of them hurriedly run down the mountain. So that's basically a Reader's Digest version of the attack, and how it became known as Ape Canyon. But because of Mark Mearcell's investigation, we have that photograph today.
Right. That's incredible.
What he is because most of these principals, well, all of the principal people, were not available to be interviewed because they were deceased. He found family, and he found, people that they had talked to or close to the family and who knew the story or whatever. And he found, it was a niece. Anyway, this was all in the Longview Daily News article dated July 1924 is when this first came to their, to the world. But anyway, these photos that he has, which that was one that was just shown. That photo was taken 6 days after the actual event.
Oh, wow.
They had gone back up to the mine 6 days later with people to verify their story. This is our cabin. This is what happened. Here's the evidence. And that's how that particular photo got taken. There's many more pictures, but the reason he had those pictures and the reason we have those pictures today is because he found a relative who had these pictures. And they were like, oh, yeah, I got pictures.
That's incredible.
Nobody had ever seen these pictures until when I forgot when he said that he found this lady and interviewed her, but just within the last couple of years.
But I'm so fascinated that these stories could have been lost forever, and he's being such a diligent, vigilant researcher. I'm so glad that he shared this story and went to all this trouble because it's not, and this is the point, guys. This is why I do this podcast. if we don't talk about the paranormal and share these experiences, they can get lost into the abyss of history. Benjamin Franklin was well known for many things, but one of the things that he said that I dearly love is if we don't learn from history, we're doomed to repeat it.
Right.
If we don't learn from what our ancestors have been through and what's around us, we're going to make more mistakes. We need to be aware of what's around us, and we need to be educated enough about what's normal so we don't shoot at things without knowing what it is we're shooting at.
Exactly. Well, I think we've evolved ourselves because of all the gathered evidence to realize that that's not proper nowadays.
Right.
But yeah,
I get the reaction though. I do understand the reaction, but it's nice to know there's more to know.
Yeah, and it's fascinating to me that these pictures were taken 100 years ago. I mean, we're talking 1924, right. And they were not found until 2124.
Yeah, that's incredible.
All right. So, yeah, I mean, you know, that's fascinating to me.
It is. It is fascinating.
Well, no, that's almost 200 years, isn't it?
I don't know.
2000, 2021, 24. Yeah, 200 years old. And they were sitting in a shoebox, and this old lady, she's an old lady today, and she was like a young girl when this happened, you know, or was passed down. And because of this interview that she had with Mark, she was like, "Oh yeah, I've got, you know, Granddad's pictures in the attic."
Isn't that incredible?
And she drug them down, and these were pictures that were taken by the family 6 days after the event.
That's incredible.
And the world had never seen before, and now they're available for us today. So that just blew my mind. And so that was worth the price of admission for me right there. Is hearing
let's go back to this picture again. I want to show this one more time. So a house that's by common standards and building materials, if we have a standard home made with 2x4s, you know, 4x6s, whatever, 4x4s, whatever the framing is, and then we have sheetrock, layers of sheetrock and insulation, it's not that unusual that something could go through that if it was really heavy enough. A bowling ball, let's say. Let's use a bowling ball as an example. If somebody really had the strength, and we're talking a lot of strength here, or some kind of mechanical slingshot that could throw a bowling ball at a house, they could go through. You know, cars do. Cars have with enough force that bash into houses and go through. But that's a much bigger object. Let's narrow it down. Let's stick with the bowling ball. If the bowling ball is flying heavy enough, you know, a 10-pound bowling ball can go through sheetrock without much effort.
Well, yeah, just like tornadoes that fling 2x4s through houses. Yes, you know.
And so what I want to impress on people to really understand is that, do I think we should be afraid of Bigfoot? I think we should respect the power of it just like we do the ocean. Mm-hmm. I think we can live together peacefully, but I think we need to really understand what it is that they're capable of and understand what it is we're talking about. Those are solid, dried trees. If you have never taken wood shop or cut wood, think about the density. That is a massive piece of material, and it's got a popped hole. Yeah, look at that. And seriously, look at
the size of the chinking. Think, you know, railroad tie.
Right.
You know,
and so granted, these are things that are parallel. It's not like they put a hole in the log, because they didn't do that.
No.
They popped a hole in wood material that was tightly wedged together with all this weight.
Yeah, because you see these chinkings or like the size of railroad ties, but they're
the horizontal lines between the logs. Those are solid pieces of wood also. That's not like, it's not a little thin piece of wood.
No. That's the size of a railroad tie. They're 3 or 4 feet long.
Right.
And 8 inches, you know, tall at least, that are wedged between it. And I don't know if you've ever picked up a railroad tie, but they weigh several hundred.
They're extremely heavy.
They're
right.
extremely heavy.
Right.
So, you know, you look at the size of the rock on the man on the right who's holding up. That's the one that was thrown hit that railroad tie size chinking and knocked it into the cabin, and still had enough velocity to carry itself into the cabin. And the guy on the left, he's holding up a rock like it's a shot put.
Right. In his right hand. It's hard to, you have to really look at the picture, but if you're watching this with us, look at where Jay's mustache is and draw a horizontal line across, and you can see the bigger log or the bigger rock that was thrown that's the size of a bowling ball. And the other one looks like a half of a bowling ball. It's pretty good size. The guy's got his hand on it. And then let's go back.
Half the size, half the width. Yeah.
So then I want to look at this other picture really quick. So if you're inside this cabin and there's multiple Bigfoots throwing rocks at you, that would be really terrifying. So I get their fear and how crazy that was. And by the time daylight came, that they had attempted to crawl under these giant logs. The depiction, unfortunately, does not represent the log cabin as it really was. No. That's a standard log cabin in the image with smaller logs.
Right.
Now let's go back to that other one again.
Yeah, that's an artist rendering of the account.
These are enormous logs. They're massive.
Yeah, and this picture was taken 6 days after the event.
This is a massive cabin. And there are other pictures from Oregon historical things that you can look at of cabins that were built exactly like this one. They're massive structures. They're incredibly powerfully built. They're not like homes we have today.
No, they're not.
So I'm just saying that's an incredible feat that happened. That's power. That's a lot of strength to throw anything through that. That's
having been a competitor in the heavy games for the Scottish Highland Games,
right?
That's what I specialized in, is throwing heavy stuff around.
Right.
That is just an amazing feat to me, because I typically throw things that are 48, 50 pounds,
right?
But they go typically about 10 or 12 feet.
Right.
You know what I mean?
That's my point. Yeah.
If I'm throwing for distance, something that, maybe goes 20 to 24 feet for distance. If I'm throwing it straight up in the air,
right.
My best is 13 feet.
Yeah.
And I'm not a little guy.
Right.
Spent my life lifting weights and in the, strength training stuff. And to be able to throw something a boulder that big, more than 24 feet, but with such velocity to be able to knock something like that out of the side of a cabin is just staggering to me.
It is.
I can't even fathom the strength that it would take to hurl something that large, that with such velocity, to be able to do that kind of damage. It's staggered. Yeah.
It's
and without incredible. Being blown out of a cannon with gunpowder,
and I think that's a fair analogy to try to describe what's happening because of this, especially that one, the smaller rock. I mean, that's still menacing, and that I'm sure that made a heck of a noise hitting the side of the building. But the one that went through, that would have really been scary.
Yeah,
to see something get through there. Luckily, it wasn't big enough for them to crawl through. But wow, that had to be one scary night. And it's really no wonder, if you think about it, no wonder those families pass those stories down. Because who would believe that? Why would you leave a mining camp where you have a job? This is a period of time in our American history where jobs were not plentiful. People were not wealthy yet. They were just barely scraping by. They were just barely getting things together. So imagine, your family members out making an income for the entire household in many cases, out by themselves, way in the woods, doing some kind of work, whether it's mining or logging or whatever.
Right.
And they leave. Yeah. They don't leave those jobs.
Right.
They don't leave those jobs. They never left those jobs. They would have to be dying to leave those jobs because there was a herd of people that were there that would replace them. So that's why they had to go back and look at what happened, because they had to prove why they left that work.
Yeah.
Because it was unprecedented.
Yeah. And, Mark, to his credit, what he had done is he had gathered all this evidence. He had gathered all these stories. and then he actually searched for and found the cabin.
That's incredible.
So he has actually found where the cabin was located, and he had taken the grandsons or whatever, or the great grandsons that are still alive, and had taken them to the site.
Right.
They took a metal detector and they found metal artifacts.
Oh, wow.
Including spent rifle shells from inside the cabin.
Wow.
From the ape attack was happening, they were shooting out the windows and stuff, trying to scare them off, trying to hit them or whatever.
Right.
But they actually found spent rifle shells from inside the cabin.
That's incredible.
Again, that correlates with the story about them fighting off this attack during the evening. Otherwise, why else would you be firing off, rifles inside of a cabin?
Well, and that's the important part, right? And to be fair, there are several violent stories with Sasquatch Bigfoot experiencers, but not many.
Right.
There are other stories of violence. This makes sense to me, though. If someone was scared, 250, 200 years ago, whatever, someone sees this massive creature, you don't know what the heck it is or what it might do to you. And they move very quickly. They're intimidating as all get out. And you just do what comes naturally, protect yourself and run like hell. So having an attack of several of them at one time, there's Native American stories about them peacefully existing side by side. In a recent interview, I've heard that Sasquatch knew several Indian languages, some Apache, some Navajo, and so on. And so there's this history. There's a very significant history that the original inhabitants of the United States, being the Native American people, they actually have very established long stories about their living in a communal manner, trading, talking, working together, sharing information and having this very positive, very healthy exchange with Bigfoot. So they're not surprised at their existence. They don't deny them. That it's part of their lineage. It's part of their history. And so for this type of outcome to happen, this is not what was the norm at the time. They were not treated like that with such fear. But if you didn't grow up knowing that they're friendly and that they're okay and they're not going to come and eat you or tear your arm off, I get it. It's terrifying.
This is an incident born of ignorance.
Exactly.
They didn't know what they had. They were simply out of fear. It's not like today where we have, TV shows and experiences and books and literature and movies. Everybody, you say Bigfoot today, everybody knows what you're talking about.
Right.
1924, never heard of it.
Right. And so nothing against the people that went through that. They clearly were responding in a natural and understandable fashion.
Right.
This younger person is working and they're out washing dishes, and then somebody may have saw or heard something before and it was scary. Maybe it was wooting, maybe it was growling. Who knows what they heard? They're out in the woods and there's predators everywhere.
Yeah, and it's ignorance and fear. And that's what this whole event was, ignorance and fear.
And honestly, the only other animal that's that big that people have experience with, and let's be really legitimate here and talk about this for a second, is a bear. Mm-hmm. Bears do run in charge and tear people up.
Right.
Everybody knows that.
Right.
So it completely makes sense to me that someone would have reacted by shooting, because it looks kind of like a bear. I don't know what that is. Oh my God, it could eat me. I can't outrun that thing. Look how big that is.
Right, exactly.
It completely makes sense.
Yeah, ignorance and fears because of the whole event.
Right.
But it's and the other thing is like I said, that to prove that this was the cabin, they had taken the grandsons or great grandsons or whatever. Mark had taken them back to the site.
Right.
They found these artifacts, and then on a later date, Mark actually wasn't with them at the time.
Right.
But the kids went back up there without him.
Okay.
And they actually found the mine. And
oh my gosh, really?
They found the gold mine.
Oh wow.
And the reason that they couldn't find the mine before is because, like I said, this cabin was built on a little shelf, okay. On the side of a mountain. The side of the mountain goes like this.
You're right, yeah.
Like
straight up and down.
Almost in the picture. It's like almost straight up and down.
Sure.
But on the side of the mountain, there's just this tiny little shelf.
Sure.
And that's where the cabin was.
Mm-hmm.
Well, on the edge of this shelf is like a near vertical drop off.
Oh, okay.
And the entrance to the mine was below that drop off.
Wow. Okay.
So if you're standing on the edge of this shelf,
right,
and you're looking, you have to look like straight down, and it's kind of underneath you. And it was in a kind of a V shape type thing was the entrance to the mine.
Wow.
But if you're standing on the edge, you wouldn't even know the mine was there until you go down below the drop off edge. And that's where the entrance to the gold mine was, which was directly above this shelf. So actually the family, descendants of the family actually rediscovered the mine to show that, yes, this is the mine. This is the cabin, what was left of it, the foundation or whatever.
Right.
And then the artifacts, of course, that they had dug up. Now, going on, after this event, luckily nearby is the North American Bigfoot Center Museum and Gift Shop, which is down the road from this event.
Cool.
And if you go there today, it's like $8 to get in or whatever.
Okay.
And they actually have the pictures that I gave to you. That is actually a picture I took because those new pictures that Mark discovered are on display there. Mm-hmm. With a short synopsis of the Ape Canyon story and whatnot, and several castings, including the S Squatch.
Oh gosh,
that is actually at this museum.
Wow.
So you can see some other castings. It's there's a little room, alcove or whatever. And it has like movie posters of like all the Bigfoot movies that I've ever made, that type of thing.
That's really clever. They did that.
Yeah, some of the metal artifacts, the little rusty metal artifacts that they found at the Ape Canyon event, are there on display as well. Okay. They've actually taken. Remember, in a previous episode, I had talked about how Bigfoot, when they make these nests, make these huckleberry vines and weave them together into like a giant bird's nest. Right. They actually have one of those on display.
Oh, that's amazing.
Intact. It's intact, but it's actually mounted vertically.
Oh.
So that you can see, the size of these little nests that they make. And so they actually have one on display.
That's incredible.
Yeah, and so I had made that stop coming down the mountain from Mount Hood, and I forgot what the town is. It's in Boring, Oregon.
Okay.
Which is right off of Highway 26, and it's not far from where this convention is. So if you would like to go to this event, hopefully they'll have it again next year. Right. I would recommend it. And while you're there, be sure, since you are so close, and for a lot of us, me anyway, I had to drive literally right by Boring, Oregon to get to the event.
Sure.
And so you have that. It's basically a 2-for-1.
Nice.
So I will mention that. So they have a lot of artifacts there. And they've got some, stuffed Bigfoots and that type of thing, make it interesting for the kids. There's a gift shop there where you can buy any little Bigfoot thing you want, T-shirts and keychains and whatever. So it's pretty cool. So anyway, that's what was happening on Saturday. Jeff Meldrum came back and he gave a pretty good dissertation on the fossil history and the record of the upright, hair-covered primates through history. This wasn't his normal kind of Bigfoot thing and talking about mid-tarsal breaks and dermal ridges and that sort of thing. He was basically talking about evolution.
Okay.
through history, and how the different branches of the humanic or humanoid or humanid family tree, and the tailless apes, and how they
Okay.
closely relate to the human beings that we are today. And very interesting, very informative, but not particularly Bigfoot centric.
Okay.
Although it was kind of a different thing than we'd gotten from Jeff in the past. So
Okay.
a little bit different, a little bit informative but different from him. And then Cliff Barakman himself from Finding Bigfoot was a presenter, and he did a lot of pump up for the Bigfoot Center that I just did. And he's been a researcher since 1994. And like I said earlier, he had, bought property in that area, so it was local to him. And he basically was talking about his Bigfoot encounters from the local neighbors, I'll say.
Oh, wow.
Because he literally, he goes out of his house and down a dirt logging road or something, and he can go out almost any day and find evidence, Bigfoot tracks and all kinds of stuff. So he was.
Can you imagine how to have that frequency? And then you mentioned also that you've learned more about things in your area too, which I find it fascinating that some areas seem to be so populated.
Yeah, I basically touched on this with you before we started, but I live in what I consider a city. Now, granted, it's a small city. We're probably 15,000 people in the summertime when all the residents are here in residency.
Right.
It's kind of a touristy town because I live at the beach.
Right.
The beach is literally, I don't know, 5 or 6 blocks to the west there, and that's where the end of the world is. And I'm living on a peninsula, so there's a bay on the other side, much like San Francisco, where there's the Pacific on one side and a bay on the other. Same thing, only I'm 700 miles north.
Sure.
And it's about 5 miles long, and I don't know, maybe a couple of miles wide. So it's just a little spit of land.
Right.
That you would never think is Bigfoot territory. And having since moved here, I am stunned, shocked, and amazed at all of the events that have taken place within my community and next to my house.
Right.
And I live what I consider in a neighborhood. I live dead center in the middle of the peninsula.
Right.
About 2/3 of the way down the peninsula. And so I don't have a lot of neighbors. I've got, basically 3. I've got the guy across the street, the guy next to him. There's an empty lot next to me to the left. And then there's a brand new neighbor who just built a house there. So I got basically 3 neighbors. Wow. There is an empty lot on to my right, and there's a house on the other side of that empty lot. I have not even seen or heard of them. I can't even see their house.
Oh, wow.
From my house, because there is a jungle thicket of, growth between in that empty lot.
Right.
And, Scott Taylor, who you did an interview with just recently, he had done many investigations that were literally blocks from my house. Literally, the street directly behind me had several incidents of these empty lots like I have next door that's really heavy, overgrown underbrush.
Sure.
Where they've actually stumbled across a Bigfoot taking a nap within sight of one of these little empty lots or whatever. And people have seen them on the beach and stuff.
Right.
The last one I talked to you about, our SAS chat, where I listed 5 local recent events that had taken place with Bigfoot's crossing State Route 109. which is the little 2-lane highway that connects Ocean Shores to Hoquiam and Aberdeen. That's our next biggest cities, right?
Right.
And it's about 15 miles long, right? Between us, we're about 15 miles away. But it's a known place for Bigfoot to cross from the Bayside back to the woods.
Sure.
And I clocked it last time I went to Aberdeen and Hoquiam. I clocked it from the locations of these 5 recent local events and the distance between, and it equaled, I forgot what I had emailed you. I think it was a half a mile.
Yeah.
I think it was a half a mile between the furthest and the closest of these 5 sightings.
Yes.
They all happened within a half a mile of each other.
And let's think about that for a minute. Wherever you live, if you're in an apartment, if you're in a home, if you are used to being in a fairly populated city, just imagine that you could be unknowingly, completely unaware, in the same neighborhood as something that we aren't even sure exists, that we still aren't able to unequivocally say, yes, for sure this exists. I am an experiencer, so I feel comfortable and confident saying, I know what I saw, and I know that the Bigfoot I saw existed because I saw it. I smelled it. I experienced it.
Yeah.
A what?
The Bigfoot community, you're what's known as a knower.
Okay.
You know.
I have heard that.
There's no equivocation. You know.
Okay.
And they just call you a knower.
Right.
You know, you have skeptics, you have disbelievers.
Which I totally understand and I respect completely. I get that. It's hard to believe. It's hard to swallow all this information and go, really? It just doesn't seem likely or probable. But yet again, you know, I've interviewed so many people in the last few years since I started this podcast, and I'm always surprised. I hear so many different stories from people in different states and different countries, and they're all these different experiences.
Right.
That, wow, they're everywhere, you guys. They're everywhere. And they're not just here in Washington State by a stretch. They are everywhere. Yeah. They're all over the world.
Yeah, you know? and the more you get into the woo aspect of the woo, weird paranormal things associated with Bigfoot, the more you delve into that and hear about those experiences, it starts to become quite, I don't know what the word I'm searching for. I have an old fart syndrome. It becomes quite evident that they have the ability to go anywhere they want to.
Anytime they want.
Time they want to, and they can show up anywhere at any time. I mean, I listen to some of these experiencers who say, yeah, you know, Bigfoot shows up in my backyard.
Right.
You know, and I always know when they're there because, you know, they'll leave something or I'll leave something for them. And
lots of exchanges, lots of shared, lots, you know, food, toys.
Right.
I hear that frequently from people. Yes.
And these are people that live in neighborhoods too. So it's like, well, how is this giant hair covered thing, you know, transversing through neighborhoods without
populated neighborhoods? Yes.
Yeah, populated. And, you know, in the wintertime, my city of, you know, 15,000 people plus tourists,
right.
You know, during the summertime, you know, in the wintertime, we probably dropped down to about, I don't know, 5,000 or 6,000.
Right.
We got the snowbirds that go off to, you know, wherever they go, it's sunny Arizona, New Mexico, whatever, Texas. And then the tourists go back to their lives and go do their thing. And then it rains from, you know, November to April, you know, here. So there's not a lot of population, just us too tough or too stupid to get out of the winter.
Right.
You know, and so we just stick around. You know, most of the restaurants close down because they can't make a living, you know, opening every day when, you know, only 5 or people show up for dinner. They can't make a buck. So everybody has winter hours and that sort of thing. But what happens in the mountains?
Right.
Wintertime is snow time. That's snow load. There's blizzards. It's, avalanches and stuff. So what do? Apparently, it's well known around here. Well, what the mountain people do is they come down to the beach.
Right.
Because they get out of the danger of avalanches and the snow, and it's nasty and horrible up there.
Right.
So they come down here where it's more temperate.
Right.
And they come down here, and what happens at that time around here? Well, it's razor clam season, and so everybody's out razor clamming, and apparently, the forest people like to hang out where, the seafood is too.
Right.
And Lyle's seafood joint, oyster farm, is right in the middle of that half a mile stretch that I talked about, where all 5 of these recent sightings were. And that's right by Lyle's seafood place. And they harvest oysters and shellfish and salmon and
all edible yummies. Yep.
Yeah, and they've got stacks as high as you can be of oyster shells and things for them to rummage through. And the bears around here rummage through garbage cans all the time.
Oh yeah.
It wouldn't be a stretch to think that Bigfoot rummages through these oyster shells, slurping out remains.
Right.
I don't know that. It's not It's not even a speculation. I'm just saying it's not a far imagination to think that, especially since that's the vicinity where all of these sightings are, and it just happens to be, Lytle's, which is in the middle between the 15-mile stretch, and it's right there on the bay, and it's right there. There's Grass Creek, I think, that runs, feeds the bay from there.
Sure.
And so it's not a stretch. So
pretty incredible. So just for everyone watching and listening, it's something to consider, not to scare anybody and not to freak anybody out, but I'm glad that we're able to talk about Bigfoot openly in the light of day and share experiences and stories and information, because we need to know more. We need to understand more. If you don't believe, or if you do believe, either way, if you're out some night and you're driving through an area that you're used to seeing people and population related things, and you see something else, maybe there's a Bigfoot in your neighborhood, maybe not, but at least be aware of the possibility, because I feel like for people that never see that something that's a miracle, that's amazing, there is still amazing things in the world that we don't know about. They say that we only have 10% or 15% of knowledge about the ocean. It's so vast. It's got more in it than the universe that we've discovered so far. That just blows my mind, that we live in this miraculous place and we know so little about it. Of course, there's going to be things that we don't know about or haven't seen yet. I'm sure there's still tons of species in the ocean we've never seen because we haven't been through all of it yet.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's because of shows like this and all the other shows, and it creates knowledge so that you don't have an incident like the Ape Canyon type thing where you make a rash, poor decision based upon fear and ignorance.
Right.
Like you had mentioned earlier, the violent episodes with Bigfoot are extremely rare.
Right.
That doesn't happen. And obviously there was a reason why this one happened. I mean, they attacked one of their members, if that's what you want to believe.
Retaliation.
And it was retaliation. And who knows? They may have killed that member of that Bigfoot family. Tribe,
There's no way of knowing. And that's why I appreciate the Native American history and their verbal historical records. Their stories that have been passed word of mouth down to each family and each tribe and each new generation. There's experiencers on the Native American groupings that have been regular. They still are communicating with Sasquatch. It's not something their grandparents did 100 years ago. They're doing it today.
Right. And if, you go to this Bigfoot Center, this center museum that I showed you, on the wall in there is a list of the tribes Native American tribes, and the word that they have for Bigfoot.
Correct.
And it is, it's a huge list.
Yes.
It goes, and that's just the local tribes for, Washington and Oregon, basically, maybe
That's
Northern
correct.
California or whatever, maybe a
Right.
little bit bleeding into Idaho.
Right.
But all these tribes, most of which, most Americans have never heard of, and it'll list these tribes and all the names that they have for Bigfoot, because, well, they don't even call Bigfoot's our word, and I guess
Right.
it's kind of alliteration of it.
Correct.
But the Native Americans call them forest people.
Yes.
Essentially, that's what they call them. They
Right.
call them forest brothers, forest people.
Right.
They consider them human beings.
Right.
They consider them, just another branch on the evolutionary tree, like maybe Jeff Meldrum talks about, maybe an unknown branch humanoid
Right.
that we're just not aware of. But the Native Americans are aware of him. They've been dealing with him, like you said, for eons.
Right.
And they've either come to peace and live peacefully with them, or they
Right.
have just said that's their territory.
There's a respect for their
There's a
areas. Right.
respect, and there's a line in the sand, and said, hey, we don't go up there.
Right.
That's his property. That's it's where they live,
Right.
and we leave them alone. We just don't go up there.
Right.
So it's one of the two. So, I mean, there are some stories of, taking children or whatever. Is it like, our parents telling our children, about the boogeyman and stuff? Yeah, stay out of there. Otherwise,
Right. Who knows? We don't know.
We don't know,
We don't know.
But they've been living with them for eons. They get along. And if you want, what we're learning today about, like, Custer's Last Stand.
Oh yeah.
If you want to know what really happened, don't talk to the white people who won, because history is written by the winners.
Yes, it is.
You talk to the Native
Everywhere.
Americans, and then they'll tell you exactly what happened, the way it had happened.
Right.
And Bigfoot's kind of the same thing. If you really want the down and dirty and the real scoop, don't talk to a bunch of scientists. Go talk to the Native Americans. They'll set you
Right.
straight.
Well, and just to be fair, so I know it may not seem like it because I probably don't look like I'm the type, but I love to study war. I'm very fascinated by it. And what Jay is saying is extremely accurate. You can go to any country in the world and research war history of battles and history of war. And it is absolutely accurate to say that someone who wins a war tends to make up the whole story, how it started, what caused it, how the battle went, what the losses were, what was used in the battle, how every detail is understood and remembered is literally dictated by whoever considers themselves the winner. There's always another part of the story that tends to get brushed off or dismissed, or the details just become not important because they don't describe the winner. There's a lot of other things that happen. Just like, if you have, friends and they get a divorce, this is a weird connection, but let's just go there for a second. Yeah. For a fact, there's one side story, the other side story. The truth is somewhere, as my mom used to say, in the middle.
Somewhere in the middle.
And so, for whatever it's worth, I think the more we talk and the more we listen, the better off we all are. So I am so glad that you're doing the corresponding on this, Jay, because I wasn't even aware of how involved the communities are. I mean, I lived in Oregon 32 years. And before that, I lived in California forever and so on. And so I've grown up being around stories about each area. Each state has their things you're used to hearing about. California, it's the earthquakes and, and mild climate, blah, blah, blah. Oregon, it's this, that, and the trees and so on. And Washington has all its, urban legends and whatever. But it's the Bigfoot thing has always been predominantly discussed in Washington, as that's their thing. It's in Washington State. So now as a resident here, I can talk, living here in Washington State for the last 11 years, I can tell you that I have not seen a Bigfoot since I've been here. I saw one in California when I was 12. But what I have seen is driving through all these small towns, because I love doing that. I'm an adventurer. I like to explore. And I can tell you that there's a ton of roadside stands that have wood carvings of Bigfoot depictions and statues. There's one of my favorite delis. There's a deli about 17 miles from my house that is a Bigfoot deli, and this wonderful couple owns it. It's out in the middle of nowhere off this little 2-lane highway, but it's the Bigfoot sandwich place.
Yeah.
And there's tons of them. You know, my husband Doug has a band that he's in, and we travel all over for different fairs during the summer. And there's always a Bigfoot statue somewhere. There's Bigfoot signs. There's
same thing here.
Oh my gosh, they're everywhere.
Yep.
It's
we have one that's life size, and it's right in front of our convention center.
It's incredible.
Yeah, we have one. I went up to Ocean City or whatever it is, a couple of miles up the coast. I went up there, and they got one too. I went into Aberdeen, and downtown Aberdeen, downtown old time shopping center type thing,
Right.
and right there on the sidewalk, they got a big Bigfoot and a little Bigfoot.
Yeah.
Baby Bigfoot right in front of the store.
Right.
So yeah, every little town up here has one.
It's amazing.
There's several houses here in my city where they have them big chainsaw carving Bigfoot in their front yards.
Yeah.
So yes,
there's a guy that's not far from where we live that actually made a Bigfoot out of driftwood, and it's incredible.
Yeah.
It's striking. It's at least 8 feet tall. It's amazing. But I'm just saying, think about Bigfoot when you're out driving around at night. Maybe you'll see one. Maybe you'll see evidence of one.
Yeah, and then you'll become I consider myself, like, you're a knower. I consider myself a curiouser.
Sure.
I'm curious about them. I'm investigating. I'm collecting evidence. I'm learning stories. I've not had an experience, I may have had an experience, but that was
Maybe.
another time. Maybe I can't prove it. It could be. I can't lean on anything else.
Right.
But I didn't see anything. I look at the evidence, and coming from a law enforcement background, evidence is evidence. Circumstantial evidence is still evidence.
Yes.
Not necessarily proof, but it's still evidence, and I'm collecting it. I collect all these notes of these events and these stories that I hear at my SAS chats that I listen to. These are people. Well, in fact, they're out in camping right now.
Right.
They're out May 29th, which was yesterday as of taping, to June 2nd. So they're out going to a place where they've had encounters before that they call very, squatchy, or I don't know, whatever the term is.
Right. Sure.
There. They're out doing their thing, collecting stories, evidence, and experiences.
Right.
They're not going to, by the way, they're not going to be back until September. So they're going to be spending the entire summer going out and doing their thing. At this last, I'll just go straight into our last SAS chat meeting, which is the local meetings at the library here.
Right.
And that was on April 19th.
Mm-hmm.
And my friend and your recent interview with Scott Taylor, Scott was there.
Nice.
And he basically used us as a preview for your interview. And we went over a lot of these woo factors of Bigfoot. And, he talked about the blue lights, which we had talked about before the show.
Yes,
a lot of times these blue lights are blue orbs, or, like the Celtic people called, willow wisps or whatever, the wisps.
Sure.
These little blue glowing forest lights are connected with Bigfoot. The glowing eyes, not reflecting eyes like animals reflecting light, but these are self-illuminated glowing eyes. He talked about the infrasound of he calls it, and the Bigfoot calls zapping,
Okay.
where they'll zap you, where you just start physically feeling sick. There's like ultra low frequency zapping that'll make you sick, that type of thing. They talk about we touched on it, the tribal people,
right?
Call them big people or forest people or forest brothers. They talk about orbs, mind speak, like you were talking about how the Native American says, "Hey man, they're speaking Navajo." What we're learning today is they have some sort of telepathy. They may not be speaking native Navajo, but what they're doing is they're implanting telepathically, and speaking the language and have that ability to communicate that way. Portals, opening up portals, that type of thing. He gave, basically a short reading list. Tom Powell is on his recommended, and he listed about 3 or 4 or 5 books that he recommends, reading for beginners. So if you want to learn more, Tom Powell, and it's spelled THOM, POWELL. He recommends at least getting these 3 books by him. It's called The Locals by Tom Powell, Shady Neighbors by Tom Powell, and Edges of Science by Tom Powell. Those are 3 books that he recommends for beginners. Sally Shepard, Valley of the Skookum. And Skookum is a Washington word up here. It's one of the Native American terms for Bigfoot is Skookum. He had talked about pinning, and that's the ability to kind of put somebody to sleep where they can't move, almost, you just catatonic type thing. They have the ability to stop you in your tracks. Mental slideshows, the ability to project pictures almost like a movie in your mind, that type of thing. Much like the UFO and ghost paranormal hunting community, they seem to have the ability to do battery drains on your electronic equipment. There have been lots of experiences with, when Bigfoot's, when you're out hunting and stuff, and cameras, freshly charged batteries just being drained to nothing. When there's Bigfoot. So you're trying to get, a lot of people ask at these events, they say, well, how come there aren't any really good pictures, or how come there's not any really good, everybody's got a camera, how come there's just no really good stuff? Hey, if they don't want you to, it's not going to happen. Battery drains, the people have got recordings that have been completely scrubbed for no apparent reason. Videos are being erased. Scott also talked about possible portals. I think it was mentioned before, I think it was by me, where Skinwalker Ranch, out in New Mexico, they had an experience where they watched from up on top of the ridge or whatever they were. They've got cameras and infrared and microwave and all stuff everywhere trying to capture all this stuff. And they watched literally in the valley below, in the a portal open up, a Bigfoot jump out of the portal.
Oh wow!
The portal close, and the Bigfoot run off and disappear with their own eyes. And they were like, "Did you get that?" And they were like, "Yeah, man,
I had not heard that. That's incredible."
Yeah, and then they go in, they run down the mountain back to the control center, and they said, show us the video of this that we just saw. And all the recordings were completely scrubbed. They didn't capture a thing. It became just another verbal incident because all of the things that they had out there recording didn't record any of it.
That's incredible.
Or if it did, it was wiped out. So
that's incredible.
Yeah. Cloaking, we talked about cloaking, predator style.
Yes.
That's something that we're learning recently, that it seems to be something that they have the ability to do. is to, like the movie Predator,
disappear right in front of us,
right in front of you. And the only time you can actually know is if they move.
Correct.
And if they move, you can see a little bit of the shimmer as they move. But if they
Right.
stop and freeze, you don't see nothing.
Right.
Another thing that is becoming more and more evident is the ability to heal people.
Yes.
People have had experiences of after having their Bigfoot experience that they've been healed of, some illnesses that have been malingering. And the other thing now this is something I heard that is new, that is fascinating to me, and that is their ability to, I don't know what you would call it, the fourth dimension or whatever, to be able to pass through material objects.
Yes.
And
yes.
that is something new that I hadn't heard before, that I'm hearing more frequently, is that on occasions these people have been in their tents and they have felt a hand, and this is more than one event, of their hand cradling their head.
Yeah.
Through the wall of the tent.
Right. So there's an interview that I did with Mike Patterson from Canada, and he has many experiences with Sasquatch on his house. And he actually has, and this is all friendly. This is not scary. None of this is wicked or horrible. It's literally pranking him. There's a couple of Bigfoot that like to joke around. And so sometimes they'll touch his leg when he's at the table having dinner, or move something in front of him, and it's all done in fun. And they, there's things that he puts out for them. So for example, they found that they like chocolate. So he's put out bags of chocolate, and they will reach in the house, grab it, and leave.
Yeah. Well,
there's a lot of that.
We had one of the ladies at our SAS chat who was talking about when she had gone camping and had her Bigfoot experience, and when she got back to her car, loading up her car to leave, and there was Bigfoot fingerprints on the inside of her driver's glass.
That's right. You told me that.
And it had left, like a greasy film, but she could see, like we were talking about, the ridges of the fingerprints and stuff. And they were 2 inches wide, each of the pads of the fingerprints. Incredible. But somehow they had left that fingerprint and that handprint on the inside of her driver's glass with her car locked.
That's incredible.
So how did it get, unless they're picking car doors now.
Right. But let's go to that for a second, and let's talk about that. For people that are afraid, for people that are concerned, if they are capable of all this stuff that we're talking about, that Jay's sharing and that I've shared, if they wanted to harm us, wouldn't they have done it already?
Oh yeah. Would be nothing for them. Would be nothing.
They don't want to mess with us. They avoid us. Hello. They don't want us to even know they exist.
I've seen lots of the t-shirts, with Bigfoot on them. It says
the best hide and go seek. Yeah.
They don't.
I really don't think we need to fear them. I think we need to respect them and give them their own space. Yep. And for heaven's sakes, if we're going to save, this will resonate with a lot of Oregon and Washingtonians. If we can save forest for a frickin' owl, we can certainly save forest for Sasquatch too.
Well, just like any other animal in the forest that we have today. I mean, when you're in their environment, just be respectful.
Right. But also to leave them space to live.
Yeah. Yeah. Just be respectful.
Well, Jay, I appreciate all of your research and your hunting and your note collecting, because you take a lot of time. I love your input, sharing about what's your interpretation of what you saw, and just your detail to things. I love that, because I'm a detail focused person. And so for those of you watching this, this is the time I have to ask, please hit the like button. Just take a nanosecond. Just hit like for me, please. It takes a second. I know it's annoying. The remote is not far from you, I promise. Just hit the like button for me. It makes a big difference. It helps my videos get places where other people can find me and see this. And if you have a question, or you want to talk to me, or you want to share a story, or you just want to ask about something, you can reach me at hollyspandorium@gmail.com. And Jay is definitely a good correspondent. If you have a question for Jay, you can shoot me a message and I'll share it with Jay too. But
Yeah,
if there's something if there's something you'd like to hear about, let us know.
Yeah, I just wanted to add a little bonus, a little surprise.
Okay.
I am going to be sending you these little paranormal research patches. I know that
that's awesome.
Just well, let's see how I can. Okay, because everything's backwards here.
Yeah, no, it looks great.
I found these at a garage sale this past weekend.
That's so cool.
And I thought that they were drink coasters. And I thought they were pretty cool. And turns out that the guy that I bought these from, he's a paranormal researcher or whatever. I told him about some of the adventures that we've had.
Right.
And he was just eating it up with a spoon. He thought it was wonderful. I talked about, the USS Hornet ghost hunt that we had and he thought it was bad. But he actually designed this. This is actually a patch.
Oh, that's so cool.
And it's a Velcro patch. So you sew this onto your jacket or your blanket or whatever you want to sew it on. Right. And then the Velcro section of the patch itself just sticks to it. And, like modern military stuff. So I'm going to be sending you a bunch of these, and you can do with them whatever it is you wish.
That's awesome.
You can give them out as gifts or promotional items or whatever. But so look for those. Excuse me. Look for those coming to you soon in the mail.
That's awesome.
So
that'll be great.
There you go.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you again for all of your traveling and collecting and your sharing, because I love hearing about all this stuff, and I'm always amazed. There's so many things that I've never heard of before. So I love that there's so many people heavily involved in the paranormal and talking about it, having events, sharing stuff. It's great.
I learn something all the time.
Yeah, me too. I love it.
These notes and stuff is because, some of these stories I've heard over and over and over again. During your interview with Scott Taylor, he told the story about when they went out and he had to take the boys and bring them back to camp, and he left the other people. I've heard that story maybe 5 or 6 times now, because that is a local story that happened. Yeah. And I've run into the people that were there.
Right.
I've heard them tell their version from their perspective.
That's awesome.
One of the ladies, that stayed when Scott took the kids back to camp, when they had their encounter, where one literally jumped up right next to Scott and ran off. Oh, wow. Well, I've heard it from Scott's perspective. I've heard it from the lady who stayed's perspective.
Right.
I heard it from another lady who had stayed in camp and was watching this happen there down the road.
Right.
So I've heard it from different perspectives of people that were at that event.
Right.
And I learned something all the time. I guess is what I'm trying to say is that, these stories that I hear over and over and over again, and when the stories are the same, that they're not lies.
Exactly. When it's a group activity and there's several witnesses and they're all sharing that.
And they're sharing their perspective of this is what happened, and this is what I experienced, and this is what I saw. Right. And it matches everybody else's story. So that's awesome. It's not a lie. It's not made up.
Right.
And so that's something that I've learned. Some of these people. Now I look at some of these people that have told stories at these Sasquatch, and I will admit some of these people I look at a little sideways.
Well, sure.
I
get it.
Like I said, I've spent a lot of time in law enforcement, and I've been lied to so often I can smell a lie.
Right.
And I look at some of these people with a little bit of a side eye and think they're grandstanding. They're, this is maybe true, maybe not true, but to me, it smells fishy.
Right. I get it.
So there is some discernment that needs to take place. You can't take everybody's story at full gospel.
Right.
But like I said, evidence is evidence, and even circumstantial evidence is still evidence.
Absolutely.
It may not be proof, but it is still evidence.
Right.
So if you happen to be out and see one, don't be surprised. Don't be scared. Stop and pay attention.
Right.
take notice of details. Remember, what am I
Right.
looking at? What am I seeing?
Right.
And focus and be awed that you're lucky.
Right.
You're lucky enough to see one, because if they don't want you to see it, you ain't gonna see it.
Right.
Okay?
I agree with that. I agree with that
Like
100%.
the poking thing is true.
There's so many ways they can hide from us.
Yeah,
If they,
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, so just count your
Exactly.
stars and thank your, the lucky stars that you saw, because you're one of the few,
Right.
and the privileged, I think.
Exactly.
And it'll probably start you down a rabbit hole where a lot of these people, like Scott Taylor, where it just becomes a voracious appetite to learn more.
Yeah. It's definitely affecting. It definitely makes you want to learn more.
Yeah.
Well, we got to close it out for tonight. But thank you, Jay. This is Holly and Jay saying thank you so much for coming back to Holly's Pandorium to watch, or welcome if it was your first time to listen or watch. Check with us. We have a new story every week we put out. So thank you so much for checking in with us, and we'll see you soon.
Good night.